I think I'm going to start. Welcome everyone to the AFSEE application webinar. I'm delighted that so many of you have shown interest and signed up for this information webinar about applying to the Atlantic Fellows for Social and Economic Equity program. So I'm going to do a few introductions to how the webinar will work and to my co-panelists. We will be covering a number of things in this webinar, including providing information about the Atlantic Fellows for Social and Economic Equity program and the application process. And at the end of our presentations, we will have time for Q&A, and you are invited to put your questions in the Q&A function, and my colleagues and I will strive to take as many questions as possible in the time. And of course, you know, there is information on our program website. We have a pretty comprehensive FAQ section that provides information. So next slide, please. So I am Professor Armina Ishkanian. I'm the Executive Director of the AFSEE program, and I'm joined today with a few of my colleagues, George Kunas, who is the Lifelong Engagement Lead. George will be saying hello and presenting shortly. Also Asma Akhtar, who is the Program Manager, and we're also joined by Julia Ring, who will be providing some support during the Q&A, and the chat function and the Q&A is also being supported by Saga Lepanen. So this webinar is being recorded, and barring any technical difficulties, we will upload it to our website. So you can view that at your convenience at a later date. As I said, please put any of your questions in the Q&A panel, and we'll strive to take as many as possible. It would be helpful if you could include your name and where you're joining us from in your question. And that's that, and we'll come back to that at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. So the Atlantic Fellows for Social and Economic Equity program has been recruiting and running since 2017. So we just recruited our 8th cohort of fellows, and we are looking to recruit our 9th cohort of fellows. So our starting point as a program is that inequality is not inevitable, and that through collaborative leadership and work, we can address social and economic inequalities and work to create a more equitable world. So we are a values-based program, and we bring together the values of fairness, commitment, curiosity, kindness, and courage. And we have been working to bring together research, education, and practice. This is where we fit in terms of fellowship programs, that we are very much a program that focuses on research as well as education, as well as bringing together leadership and practical work practice. So we are based at the London School of Economics at the International Inequalities Institute, and we draw on experts across LSE through the International Inequalities Institute as well as beyond to lecture and to mentor fellows on the program. We recruit up to 18 fellows annually for each cohort, and generally the breakdown is 50-50, and 50% of the fellows are recruited, so 9 fellows into the residential track and 9 fellows in the non-residential track. The fellows who are selected to be on the residential track, will undertake an MSc in Inequalities and Social Science, which is based at the Department of Sociology, in addition to undertaking 5 weeks of AFSEE modules that are broken into four modules over 5 weeks over an academic year that begins in September and then ends in June. The non-residential fellows do not move to London over the fellowship year. They stay in their home countries. They, however, travel to London during 4 of the 5 weeks of the fellowship to undertake modules. And this is the second year, which we will be offering the postgraduate certificate in social and economic equity, which means that the non-residential fellows will earn a PG cert, which is the equivalent of 2 full units of work, so transferable units. So this is how the program is structured, and we're very excited, as I said, to be now in the process of recruiting our 9th cohort of fellows. I'm going to now hand over to my colleague George, who will lead us through the next part of the presentation.
Hello, hi everyone. Welcome to the AFSEE space. I'm George Kunath. I'm an associate professor and lifelong engagement lead for the AFSEE program. If you ask me what is special about AFSEE education, I will say ours is a pedagogy of dialogue, a dialogic education. You might have come across Paulo Freire's work, a Brazilian educationalist, who talks about in his book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, that education should not be like a banking model. A banking model is where the teacher puts, just like in the bank, we put money, but the teacher puts knowledge into students. Whereas ours is that draws on a dialogue between research and practice. So practice informs research and research informs practice. So that all that we engage in become a kind of a dialogic action where we co-produce knowledge. So pedagogy is dialogic, and it brings in the expertise and the cutting edge research of LSE, especially in understanding the root causes of inequality, the structural dimensions of it. So on one hand, that emphasis on bringing research-rich aspect of it. And the second one is that the fellows bring their experience of practice in governance, practice in social action, practice in government. So all that bring in. So this continued dialogue is that makes our education very special, dialogic education. And in the next slide, I will focus on how we put this into practice, this approach. May I have the next slide, please? So this is how our learning approach, our curriculum that brings together a structural analysis of global inequalities. And not only analyzing global inequalities, we also want to understand how to challenge, how to resist these inequalities. So it considers not root causes and system change and intersectionality and narratives. Intersectionality, especially, we want to understand how, for example, inequality is intersects with other forms of inequalities like class, gender, ethnicity, caste. So therefore, to bring in that an intersectional dimension is very much part of our learning approach. And we identify and examine economic and policy solutions. And as Armina just mentioned, we emphasize values-led collective leadership approach. And how do our modules consist of? Lectures, panel discussions, presentations, group work. During modules, you will be also introduced to theories, concepts, and approaches for understanding and challenging inequality. We also integrate practical work and community building in all modules. Now, in the next slide, a little more of concrete how these modules are organized, we will see. So we have 4 modules. The first module that characterized by it's in 2 weeks, so it's continuously 2 weeks. And we deal with the foundations of social and economic inequalities. And the academic emphasis on understanding the histories of inequalities, especially the role of colonialism we will engage with. And we will also want to understand what big picture of inequality consists of. Therefore, we look at intersectionality, as I mentioned earlier. We'll try to define and measure inequality. What is wealth inequality means, what is income inequalities, and what are the alternative modes of challenging this inequality is possible, and what are the other visions possible. That's a kind of an academic focus of it. And then also during the module, we'll also focus on professional and leadership skills. How do you develop? So there is reflexivity and ethics, coaching, action learning, and also a space to reflect and connect with one another. So that's also an important aspect of our modules. And modules also then continues with the community building. There is also community building London done through a tour of the City of London inequality tour, LSE treasure hunt, where we work with each other to find out the answers of various questions. It also brings in our own senior fellows for a round table. And this is actually for every module, there will be a round table by senior fellows. So this is our first 2 weeks, the first module that's usually held in September. And our second module, which is online, and that is held in February, it is for 1 week. It also has an academic, our focus is on policy for equity. And the academic component of it will be introduction to social and public policy, and also understanding key actors, especially international organizations, the state, NGOs, and various other rights groups. So we have that as a kind of focus. Then this module also will have a professional and leadership skills building focus. So we will invite specialists who will tell us about how do we raise funds, how do we apply for grants, and there will be action learning here again, and time to reflect and connect with one another through various networking activities. Then, as in the first module, in the second module too, we have community building. So opening and closing sessions, we will focus on that. Then project proposal presentations will be a time where we help each other, listen to each other, and give our feedback. And this again, in this module, there will be a senior fellows roundtable. Three senior fellows are invited to present their experience and how they tackle inequality. Then in third and fourth module are held together. It's sometime in late June, early July. So it is the third module then will focus on challenging and transforming inequality. Again, academic component, examining the role of a range of civil society actors, NGOs, social movements, etc., in tackling and challenging inequalities. Here again, there is a time for professional and leadership skills, media engagement, that will be a focus on action learning, and reflect and connect with one another. Community building is part of, again, this module, dissertation presentation. So this is also the time when the residential fellows will present their research dissertation proposals and get feedback from the cohort, from the group. And this would have as final part of it, it also will have a roundtable by senior fellows. And the fourth module on looking at the current challenges, it's a theme-based module. So we take into account the current challenges facing the world. Like, for example, recently we had one on climate justice, and the most recent one was on conflict and peace building and justice. So this is how our module is arranged. And we'll go further a little more about how the time is divided in the next module, in the next slide. So this is like 4 areas of focus that we give emphasis on. What I said about first is academic content, and that we understanding and measuring inequalities, engage with the public and social policy, transform and challenge inequalities, consider alternative perspectives, and intersectionality and praxis. that dialogical dimension. This is the kind of a component of the academic. Then leadership skills, we mentioned in each module, we had an emphasis on that involve ethics and leadership, reflect and connect, and also facilitate action learning. Professional skills, again, part of each module. It's media training. Then we also write about how to prepare to have blog posts, op-ed writing, writing for policymakers, writing for grant applications. And also part of this professional skills also, we will try to see how do we do more storytelling, narratives, and all that also part of the training. And there will be community building. Again, as in all modules, the emphasis will be on how do we work together with each other, how we build collective leadership, and this will be all part of it. And one more last slide for me, please. So this is how the program is for the 12 months of current fellowship experience. Now, if you look at the amount of time spent for each of this, 5 weeks will be spent in module. It's at, and then for non-residential fellows, 2.5 months will be preparing the project proposals, and 6 months will be in writing and putting into practice or implementing that project. And for residential fellows, the first 6 months will be spent in MSc classes. They do MSc in inequality and social science. And the 3 months during the summer term will be spent in dissertation writing, which will be for 10,000 words. So this is how the current fellowship experience will span out. Thank you very much. And now I'll hand over to my colleague, Asma Akhtar.
Thank you, George. Hello, everyone. My name is Asma Akhtar. I am a program manager on the AFSEE team, and I work very closely alongside George and Amina, who have both already spoken. I'm sorry for having my camera off today. I'm experiencing some connectivity issues, and I'm also recovering from a recent cold. So as you can see from this slide, we are a growing AFSEE global community, and we have over 130 fellows from or based in 59 countries around this world. On this slide, the countries shown in blue highlight if there is an AFSEE fellow either from the highlighted country or currently based there. And as you can see, we have fellows based in 6 out of 7 continents from across the world, and I yet to welcome a fellow from Antarctica. You can find out more information about specific countries represented in our community on the AFSEE website. Next slide, please. Each AFSEE fellow commits to belonging to the AFSEE community on an ongoing basis, even after they have completed their active fellowship year. We refer to this commitment as lifelong engagement, and lifelong engagement for senior fellows refers to amplifying the impact of your active fellowship over time, as this should allow you to shape, grow, and scale social change. The AFSEE program aims to do this by supporting your professional development requirements, providing you with access to networks as well as a growing global community of Atlantic fellows. We will also support your continuous learning through knowledge sharing and skills building, facilitating your knowledge exchange and impact. And this is all in addition to regular community building exercises held throughout the year that are designed to connect senior fellows to their own cohort, across cohorts, and the AFSEE team. Next slide, please. The AFSEE program provides comprehensive support to fellows as part of their active fellowship year. This includes, for all fellows, mentoring from the AFSEE team and experts to support knowledge, skills, and leadership development. Project support to enable fellows to offer rigorous evidence-based and practical solutions to tackling inequalities. A lifetime access to a global community of Atlantic fellows and learning, leadership development, and networking opportunities provided by the Atlantic Institute based in Oxford and the AFSEE program. We also provide various avenues of additional support and funding to ensure that once you have been accepted, there are no barriers for AFSEE fellows to fully participate in the program. Example of these funds include the Family Care Support Fund, the Connectivity Fund, and the Hardship Fund. Furthermore, for residential fellows, the AFSEE program will cover the full tuition fees for the Masters in Inequalities and Social Science at LSE. We will also provide a £23,000 tax-free stipend to support your living expenses, as well as covering the costs of any travel, visa, and English language exam reimbursement costs. There will be an opportunity to apply for the Dissertation Support Fund of up to £1,000 during your active fellowship year. For non-residential fellows, the AFSEE program will cover the cost of the full tuition fees of the postgraduate certificate in social and economic equity. You will also be able to apply for up to £10,000 funding to develop and deliver a project within the active fellowship year, and all costs relating to travel, visa, English language exam reimbursements to participate on the AFSEE program and modules will also be covered by the AFSEE team. Furthermore, we will provide you with an £1,000 scholarship to cover any costs of joining the module and participating in the module. Next slide, please. The deadline for applications is 5 p.m. UK time on Friday, 10th of January 2025. All applications must be submitted online via the LSE Graduate Admissions online portal. We cannot accept any applications via email to the AFSEE inbox. We strongly recommend that you start the application process as early as possible. As you'll know from this webinar, you can apply for either the residential track or the non-residential track. Technically speaking, you are able to apply for both tracks. However, we strongly recommend that you carefully consider which track suits you best, as you will be able to draw on this reasoning in your application. You have to begin your application process by entering the LSE Graduate Admissions online portal and selecting which track that you would like to apply for. Please note that there is no application fee to join the non-residential track. If you are interested in applying to the residential track, then you should select the option Atlantic Fellows Residential Program with their Masters in Inequalities and Social Science option. If you only apply to the residential track, please note there will be no application fee, as this is covered by the AFSEE program. However, if you wish to apply for another LSE degree program, a fee will be payable for that application, and this is over £75 currently. Next slide, please. I'm now going to hand over to Amina.
Thank you, Asma, and thank you, George, for your presentations. I want to now just turn to the final bits of our presentation, which is looking at our selection. So we are looking for people who have 7 to 10 years minimum experience of working in social change. Now, that can be in different contexts. It could be someone working in an NGO, someone working, for instance, in an international organization, in a research institution, a higher education institution, so forth. So, but, you know, we are looking for people who have some work experience, and work is broadly defined. But that work should be focused on addressing social and economic inequalities, and be prepared to take some time and reflect on that, either through a one-year master's program where you move to London and undertake the MSc in Equalities and Social Science alongside the AFSEE modules, or non-residential where you continue with your work but join the program for the 5 weeks of the modules. Now, as my colleagues have already said, our applicants come from all over the world and are working in different sectors of social and economic equity. So we have fellows who have worked on urban inequalities, on women's rights, on land issues, on tax justice, fiscal and tax justice. So we recruit from a broad range of countries and people working on a broad range of issues dealing with social and economic inequalities. We are very keen to provide opportunities for those who have not had opportunities. So it's about widening access. So we are looking to recruit people who have not had many fellowship opportunities in the past. But each decision we make is context-based. So we will be looking at the whole application and taking into consideration a number of different factors. And I would also add that I've seen some questions in the Q&A about, can I apply if I have a previous master's? Again, we do prioritize individuals who have not had the opportunity to study in the UK to get a master's degree. However, we will take each application in consideration and in context. And our selection, our selection process, we do look at a number of factors from experience to the understanding of inequalities, the vision, the leadership potential, the motivation for joining AFSEE and being part of this community. And in terms of the residential fellowship, fellows must meet the criteria set by the LSE's Department of Sociology in terms of gaining access to the master's program. So that is something that must be borne into consideration. So next slide, please. Thank you. So we are looking for applicants with a strong record in challenging inequalities and whose work and life purpose does align with the visions of our program. We are looking for people who will benefit from this program. So if you've had lots of different fellowship opportunities and want to add another, this isn't necessarily the program for you, because we are about widening access and giving opportunities to individuals who have not had those opportunities. So we will be taking that into consideration, and particularly wanting this program to be transformational for those who get selected. It is for people who are keen to join a global community and to bring their experience and to share and learn with others, together with others, and to commit to being an active member of this community, not just in the active fellowship year, but also as we are a lifelong engagement program in the years beyond. So we will be having another webinar where we'll be talking more directly about the application process. But just if you would like to get started and looking at the applications, please read the questions carefully and keep your answers focused and clear. We are interested in your experience and why you would like to be a fellow and how this will be transformative for you. We want examples, so highlight your achievement and areas of growth. Don't assume that your CV alone will speak for itself. And please, this is more on the technical side, please save your answers in a Word document and then copy paste into the online portal where you're submitting your application, because you don't want to lose anything that you have written. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we are having another webinar, and that webinar will be focused directly on how to apply. That webinar will be held on the 18th of November at 2 p.m. GMT. I will be joined by George and my colleague Julia, who's also on these, who are both on this call, and we will also be joined with a representative from the LSE Graduate Admissions Office, and that webinar will be more directly focused on providing information about the application. So this is not your final opportunity to ask any questions about the application. So next slide, please. So now I am going to turn to the Q&A and attempt to take as many questions as I can. So thank you, everyone. I will start from the beginning. So I have a question here from an anonymous attendee, and the question is if a faculty or professor is eligible to apply, and does the individual need to have a full-time position to apply for this fellowship? So the answer is that yes, we have had in the past academic applicants, and we do have fellows who are working in universities and teaching in universities. So individuals who are employed in higher education are eligible to apply. They will obviously, like everyone else, need to explain their motivation for joining the program. We do not accept applications from people who are currently doing PhDs because we know how robust and rigorous a PhD program is, so we don't accept applications from current doctoral candidates. And you do not need to have a full-time position to apply. So I think I have answered the question from Ahmed Bouhedji about the ideal candidate for the non-resident track. Ideal candidates are both, people who are experienced, have work experience, and who can demonstrate a motivation for joining this community and how by joining this community they will benefit. On average, how many applications do we receive? This is a question from an anonymous attendee. In the past 2 years, we have received over around 650, 700 applications. So it is very competitive because we only offer 18 slots annually. So it is very, very competitive. A question from an anonymous attendee who says, I wanted to know whether this requires us to apply for the postgrad program. You only apply for the postgraduate, well, it depends on what you mean by the postgraduate program, but you need to apply for either the residential or the non-residential track. If you are applying for the residential track, then you are also applying to have a place on the MSc in Inequalities in Social Science. The question, again, from an anonymous attendee, if applying for the non-residential program, do we have to submit transcripts and school details? If you have those, then you are required to submit them. If you don't have those, then we will explain how you just put in a sheet of paper and you say that I don't have this. Now, for the residential track, you are required to have a certain level of education because that's part of the criteria for acceptance into the master's program. There is no such requirement for the non-residential track. And if you did complete your undergraduate degree decades ago, then yes, for the non-residential track, it would be acceptable to submit professional references. Question from Lucien. Are there specific numbers? Yes, it's 18 maximum per year, and we generally award 9 and 9. So 9 on the residential and 9 on the non-residential. So question from Francis, who is joining us from Nairobi. Question is, for the non-residential track, are the fellows required to attend 4 full weeks out of the 5 weeks? Yes, that is an absolute requirement. So 4 of the 5 weeks are in person, and the fellows would be required to attend in person. The 5th week is done online, and again, attendance is required, but it's obviously online attendance. So we have a question from Ludmila, who is from St. Martin, and the question is, can you provide details on the travel aspect for non-residential candidates? So we cover all travel and accommodation costs for the non-residential and residential. For the non-residential candidates, we cover your travel and accommodation costs. So that is part of the program. And as my colleague Asma mentioned, we will also cover the visa cost, and non-residential fellows also receive a £1,000 scholarship to cover any joining costs initially. So I have a question here from Tasneem, and I am reluctant to answer individual questions about eligibility. So I assume your question, Tasneem, is about whether if you can apply if you have been awarded another fellowship. I would say, it depends on your overall application and why you would feel that you need yet another fellowship if you have just completed one. So I don't want to rule out and say no categorically, but it's important that individuals such as yourself who do have other fellowship opportunities explain in their application why they would prefer to also have or why they are applying to an AFSEE fellowship. I have a question from Anne-Marie, who is joining us from the Philippines. Thank you, Anne-Marie, for joining us. And I think I have, so one question is, what specific profile are you looking to or quality for the fellowship? I think I've answered that in the presentation, but again, people who have 7 to 10 years minimum of social change work and can demonstrate how this fellowship program will benefit them. What will the schedule of classes per week be for the modules? These are intense, so there will be for the 2-week in-person modules, they are pretty much full days. It's not classes only. We have like community building activities, leadership activities, skills building, but they tend to be 5 days of activity. There's a question from Anne-Marie about a gender balance in the selection of fellows. We, of course, pay attention to gender, but that's, we have tended to have more females than males generally, and we do take that into consideration. We tend to have a more balanced cohorts, but gender is only one element that we take into consideration. So we don't operate a gender quota system. Question from Shaheen, who's joining us from Mauritius. I am looking at the question, which is not individually personalized. The question is, for the non-residential track, are there does the fellowship project be required to be place-based? No, you're not required to do your project in the country where you live in or where you come from. Your project needs to be about an element of social and economic equity, but it does not need to be linked to the country where you live in. If you want a response to your individual question, I would suggest you get in touch with us via email because we can answer that in greater depth. We have a question from Purnima from Bangalore, from India. This question is related to the residential track. And the question is, the selection criteria mentions the need for a focused agenda and plan to use knowledge and skills gained. Does this mean we need to submit a specific project plan with clear outcomes or general goals and future plans? So I'm not sure that is actually accurate because the residential track is more about a dissertation. It isn't about a project. You do a project on the non-residential track. So we do look for applications that have a clear project idea, and we do pay attention to that. Now, we do also recognize that when fellows join, that they will change their mind in the sense of having some access to further learning and refine that project further. So we are open to having that modified slightly, but it can be a little broader, whereas for the residential track, you do a dissertation that is an academic piece of work. So that is the anticipation is that for the dissertation, you are also still coming in with some idea, but that obviously you will be taking courses throughout the academic year, and your thinking will be developed through that and what you write for your dissertation. The question from an anonymous attendee is, must each candidate have a 2-1 degree to qualify? So that, I assume, is a question for the residential track, because the non-residential track is not, a 2-1 is not required. For the residential track, yes, to have a competitive application, you need a 2-1 or a 3.5 GPA. There have been instances, and these are rare and not, they are more the exception, where a special case can be made in the instance of an extensive CV and life experience. But generally, the minimum criteria for acceptance on the residential track for the MSc in Inequalities and Social Science is to generally have a 2-1 degree to be competitive, although in rare instances, a special case can be made. The question from Alistair is, what is the workload for non-residential fellows? Can I complete coursework fellowship while having a full-time job? That is a very good question. Yes, many of our non-residential fellows do maintain their full-time employment while taking on the fellowship. It is up to the individual to have an ability to kind of balance different things. Now, obviously, if you have a full-time job, you will need to also agree with your employer to take the time out for 4 weeks over an academic year. So 2 weeks in September and 2 weeks in June to travel to London and to undertake the modules in person. And of course, to have time online during February to do the online module, but that's a smaller time commitment in terms of the module time. But you will need to think about how will you balance working on your project and other assignments that come with the postgraduate certificate program with your. So it is important that you, if you are applying, that you have a conversation with your employer, be able to take that time off, because it is part of our requirement that it is in-person attendance during the in-person modules. Question from Funmi from Nigeria. Can I go ahead with uploading my transcript? Yes, you can, if you can start with your application. I will revert to my colleague Julia, but I think you don't have to upload all of the materials immediately. I think you can save your application and go back. Julia, is that accurate?
So yes, that is accurate. But I would like to stress that we do need your degree certificates if you indicate that you have undertaken a degree. So and this will need to be provided with the official documentation from the university. But if it's a very difficult task to get those official documents, we do have on a case-by-case basis ability to kind of waive those requirements, but it is quite integral for the university to receive evidence of those certificates.
Thank you, Julia. Thanks. And you also have a question, Funmi, about proof of an English speaking. So on our website and on the LSE's website, there is information about the IELTS requirement, and it does indicate the countries from which applicants need an IELTS score. As my colleague Asma mentioned, AFSEE does cover the cost of the English language exam if there is an offer made. So, question from an anonymous attendee: if an applicant already has a master's degree but wants to implement project through their own co-founded organization, is the non-res program better? Yes, generally, that is accurate. Question from Avijit from India. Do I have to create a budget for the proposed work? for the £10,000 on the non-residential program. So once you are on the program, you will work with the program team, relevant program team members, and they will inform you about on what expenses the £10,000 can be used for the project, and you will need to put together, a budget in order to indicate what you will be spending that funding on. Question from Eslam from Sudan. Question is, would you be able to explain specifics on the work requirement? Now, as I said, we talk about work and work experience in a broad sense, so we are not looking specifically only at paid work or paid work in a particular sector. The work can be, done in a NGO, as I said, for instance, in a international organization, in a ministry that works on social issues, can be at a higher education institution, a think tank, a grassroots group. So it's quite wide, but we do require at least 7, preferably 10 years of experience. Question from Francesca. If you were accepted, would there be any way to defer by 1 year if your personal circumstances change? A bit early to be asking that question. We only defer in exceptional circumstances. So it would have to be exceptional circumstances, not if a better opportunity came up. So we don't generally recommend deferrals. We don't offer deferrals immediately. We offer deferrals on only exceptional circumstances. And those have been very rare. So please, think about if you have time in the next coming year to undertake this and then apply, because deferrals are not guaranteed. Question from Alex. Sorry, just the question flew out. Well, if you don't have the marks, Alex, you say my grades suck, but I have visions and everything else. Well, if your marks are in fact not the strongest, then you may wish to apply for the non-residential route. And I can't comment on, without seeing your full application and transcripts, whether there would be an opportunity to make a special case on the residential track. But as I said, that is the criteria, and the expectation is that it is a 3.5 GPA or a 2.1 degree. Question from Senzo from South Africa. The question is, for the non-residential track, can you shed more light on the minimum expectation of a project? So in terms of a project, it could be, different types of formats. It can be a report. It can be a series of podcasts. We've had fellows do that. It can be a short film. It depends on what output you want to create, but it should be linked to your work, and it should be something that you want an opportunity to spend a year developing. So this is something that you should think about, what kind of work that you want to do with your project. And it can be something, quite creative. So we had a fellow a few years ago who made a virtual reality film with that funding. And then that film has now gone on to win awards. And in terms of how much time one should set aside for the fellowship on a weekly basis on the non-residential track, it depends on how quickly you work on things. But I think, setting aside time is important. I'm reluctant to put a specific number on that, but I think, it is important to set aside some time, because for the PG cert, you will have assignments that are due there, and, such as a blog that you'll need to write and so forth. But also for the project, you need to be consistently working. Now, during the year, there will be periods of more intense activity and periods of less activity. But it's important to acknowledge that if you are undertaking this fellowship alongside paid work, that you will be able to allocate sufficient time to meet the requirements. Asma and Julia, please come in if I'm not fully answering, and George as well, if I'm not, if you'd like to add anything to what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina. I will just come in on that question and say that we recommend on the non-residential track, people are putting aside 8 hours a week, and that this number of hours will increase as you then start to work towards different deadlines and completing the bulk of your project. But yes, from September onwards, it would be in the region of around 8 hours a week for majority of the year, and then dialing that up as and when required.
Thank you, Asma. Yeah, I was reluctant to put a number because I know it fluctuates during the year, but that's a good signpost. Question from an anonymous attendee, what is the acceptance rate for non-residential track? Is there a limit of 1 or 2 applicants per nationality? That's a very interesting question. So the acceptance rate is, we have a maximum of 18. So generally it is very competitive. The past couple of years, it's been 2-3% acceptance rate. So it is highly competitive. Yes, we generally do put a certain cap on the number of applicants from a particular country, because there are certain countries where we have a very high number of applications. So, we are not a program that is only focused on one country. So, we do try to maintain geographical and country diversity amongst our acceptance. Question from Viveka. Are there any suggestions or preferences for how project implementation deliverables are to be demonstrated for non-residents? No, as I said, you can have different kinds of outputs. The project should be clearly, what plan you have should be clear in the application, because that is something that we do focus on to see whether applicants have thought about, what kind of a project they would like to implement. And that is something that for those applicants who do get to the interview stage in the application process, that we will ask questions about, the project and what they hope to achieve, with the understanding, of course, that there is room for modification over the year as well. Question on, can the MSc be done on a part-time basis? Yes, but we don't generally recommend it, because you can do the MSc in a part-time basis, but we do generally say that you should do the fellowship in 1 year. So, however, we can have a discussion on an individual basis. Question from Dale. Looking at your fellows, I see individuals who are established within organizations in terms of their role. Are candidates who have a non-traditional status in doing this work attractive? Yes, we do have CEOs and founders of organizations. We also have individuals who are not CEOs and founders, and who have come from other non-traditional backgrounds. So it is about having the years of experience and being able to communicate that in an application. And so that is the thing that we will be paying attention to and looking at. Question from Sylvie from Philadelphia. If you are applying, so you seem to have graduated many years ago from your MA, and if you are applying to the MSc, there, you can explain if you don't have access to your academic mentors to obtain an academic reference, and we can accept a reference from a professional mentor or colleague. Julia, do you want to add anything, or Asma, on that?
No, I think that's all fine. As we've had these kind of cases before, and 2 professional references will be sufficient.
Okay, thank you.
Just
Thanks, Julia. Oh, sorry, Asma.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Amina. Thank you, Julia. Just to specify, sometimes you will be requested or asked that a professional email address, for instance, from the domain is from the organization that you state this person is providing a reference from, you may be required. So a personal Gmail address in some instances would be unsuitable if you are saying your referee is from an organization, because then they would be asked to provide that reference from the organization. So that's just something to bear in mind. But if you have any specific queries in relation to references or referees, you can reach out to the program team, either Julia or myself, or the graduate admissions office also has a help desk form, and you can write to them with specific queries, and they are very responsive and helpful, and they can come back to you on that query.
Thank you. Asma, since you and Julia are here, can you take the next question, which is from Dominique, about what sort of dissertation expenses are common or that might exist outside of the 1K stipend? I'm assuming they're not talking about dissertation expenses, but the non-residential track, because that's the.
Yeah. So
I mean, I don't understand that question.
I can answer it in terms of both, because in the slides we did say that residential
Okay.
fellows will have the opportunity to apply for £1,000.
Oh, yes. Okay.
As part of the dissertation support fund. So the dissertation support fund, the £1,000 will cover the costs of any travel or fieldwork expenses. For example, if you are hosting focus groups or one-to-one individual interviews as part of your data collection, the dissertation support fund would cover any costs of that. If you are traveling to a site abroad and you need to book air or train tickets, the dissertation support fund, providing it comes within the £1,000 budget, it would cover the costs of that. If, however, the question is referring to £1,000 non-residential scholarship, this £1,000 is paid in two £500 instalments, and it is to cover the costs of joining for the modules in London. So it would cover any food or drink costs that you may incur, or in case you need to buy some warm winter clothing because it can get very cold in London sometimes, or summer clothing, etc. Just those types of costs. Julia, please come in if you feel like I've missed anything.
No, I think that's pretty straightforward what you just said, Asma. I think with regard to dissertation expenses, we ask, when applying for the dissertation support fund, we ask that each person applying submits indicative budget of what the £1,000 would be used for. So within that, you would indicate travel, potential rewards for participants if you're doing focus groups or interviews. It's up to you how you structure the actual field work, and to make sure that you don't have expenses outside the 1K that we cannot support you with.
Thank you. Thank you both for that reply. So the next question is from Jennifer. Question is, would we consider applicants who were not successful in the previous cycles? Yes, we do. And I would urge everyone to look at participate in the second webinar we're hosting about applications, as we do provide quite a lot of information and tips on applying and strengthening your application. And Jennifer also asked the question, would you consider applicants with disabilities? Most certainly, yes. We are a very disability-friendly program, and we work with the LSE Disability and Wellbeing Service to make any adjustments and accessibility. So yes, please do take that into consideration, and we do, as I said, work to make that space welcoming and inclusive for all. Question from an anonymous attendee. Question. Okay, I've already answered the question about professional references. Okay, the second question, which is, if you're applying for an LSE, MSc, apart from the AFSEE one, two things to bear in mind. Number one is that AFSEE will only cover the application cost for any application made to the AFSEE program. If you choose to apply to another LSE program, you will have to cover the cost of applying to that program yourself. AFSEE will not cover it. Secondly, if you are writing a statement of purpose you should consider writing two different ones, because the AFSEE statement will ask you to consider specific questions and points, whereas that might not be suitable if you are applying for another MSc program. Question from Subrajyoti from India. So yes, I mean, you know, I cannot comment on individual applications. If you are eligible, please look at our eligibility criteria. Question from anonymous attendee. Is a degree a requirement? Some of us do not hold degrees, but may be studying towards them. A degree is a requirement if you are applying for the residential track. It is not a requirement if you are studying for if you're applying for the non-residential track. Question from anonymous attendee. After the application is submitted, are there other steps in the selection process? So yes, after the applications are submitted, they will go through several rounds of selection, and we tend to have a short list of about 45 individuals whom we, about 50 sometimes, invite for interviews, and then the final offers are made. And these tend to happen in the spring. So for us, the global north spring, so we're talking about around April. Question, is participating in a leadership exchange between two countries in the past? Well, put it in your application, but it shouldn't be the only thing that you're putting in, right? Question from Miriam, what kind of experience is required, national or international? It can be local, it can be national, it can be international. Depends on what level you are working on in terms of addressing social and economic inequality. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be local, national, international, transnational. Question from Diary from Indonesia. Is there a specific score for English IELTS? Yes, there is. And I'm going to refer you to our frequently asked page, or Julia, and
yes, they're on our website and on the LSE General Graduate Application admissions website. There is an indication of the IELTS results that you need to get in order to be eligible to come study in the UK. This is set by the university, and not set by the university, it's set by the UK immigration, so it's out of our control. So please do look into that.
Thank you, Julia. Question, and I'm going to start moving quite quickly because we've got 73 questions and 25 minutes. So could you please share how detailed our plans for the fellowship project need to be? Well, obviously, we're not looking for a budget breakdown and a Gantt chart necessarily, but we are looking for specificity about, you know, the project and why, particularly the why and potentially the how in terms of, you know, kind of outputs that you want to deliver. Question, I'm not going to take individual questions about, you know, individual eligibility. Please email those separately. Question about from an anonymous attendee, are both tracks equally competitive? Yes, absolutely. Question from Miriam, if a candidate has a master's degree, do they need to submit transcripts for the undergraduate level as well? I believe LSE requires that, but what will be taken into account more will be the last degree. Am I correct, Julia?
Yes, you will need to submit transcripts for all the degrees that you indicate you've taken.
I've already answered whether someone with a PhD can apply. And then the question, but a PhD in hand, not while doing a PhD. Okay. Question, is there a place for those working in education for special needs children? From a question from Funmilola. Yes. Question from VJ. Someone, okay, in terms of, again, if you have high work experience, we can take that into account. But, you know, we cannot change the criteria for the master's program. So you may wish to apply to both residential and non-residential tracks. If you feel that your academic transcripts would not be high enough to gain a place in the MSc. Question, is there a need to submit an English proficiency certificate while applying for the residential fellowship? Julia?
I can come in on this one if that's okay. Your application will be considered without the proof of English proficiency. However, what we would strongly recommend is that you submit this proof as soon as possible. And if you are offered a place on the AFSEE program, then AFSEE will cover the costs of any IELTS exams. One thing I will say is that the LSE requirement for IELTS specifically is 7. And you need to have 7 in all 4 areas that you are being tested on. Requesting a waiver or an exception, these are very rarely granted. So if English proficiency, if you don't yet have proof or you haven't completed the test yet, as part of your application process, we would very strongly encourage you to start thinking about when you could, the sooner you could set up those tests or submit that proof, because it is a necessary part of the process, whether you do it sooner or later. So that's what I wanted to say on that. Back to you, Amina.
Thank you, Asma. So question, this is a question from an anonymous attendee about whether the application supports persons with disability to apply, and if I can get the application form offline to be able to answer. I think this is something that the LSE should be able to offer, because your application is submitted via the LSE. We can, unless Julia or Asma, you know the answer, we should probably check this, but I think that should be possible.
I think we've had similar requests like this in the past, and I do remember that we connected the applicant to LSE admissions and the Disability or Wellbeing Center. So I would just encourage you to contact us directly, and then we can see how best we can support you.
Thank you. Question. So question from Sylvie about the specific dates for the London portion for the non-residential fellows. That is available on our website. So please visit our website for the specific dates in September 2025 and June 2026, and you will see those dates. So questions that are very specific to the applicant, I'm not going to take. Question, are we going to prioritize certain countries for the next cohort? No, we prioritize applicants that are not country. So question from Aziza about for residential candidates, do they receive an academic or thesis advisor? Yes. All LSE students receive an academic mentor. Question on the residential scholarship covering family cost. Asma or Julia, would you like to take that question?
Yes, thank you, Amina. I will say from my understanding, the legislation has recently changed. So the UK government no longer allows the bringing of partners from abroad to the UK for postgraduate study. So no cost can be provided in relation to that. What we do provide support with is childcare costs. And there is an application form, and we discussed this with the individual applicant, but this with the individual fellow. But this is all of this is completed and provided once a fellow has been officially enrolled onto the program. For non-residential fellows, we provide childcare costs, support with childcare costs during the actual module and the week before the module to help with any pre-readings. So that is what we offer in terms of childcare support. All of this, there are limits to the childcare support that we can provide, but there are some provisions. So we encourage fellows to just talk to us on an individual basis so we can see what is feasible for them and if it works within our overall limits.
Thank you, Asma. So we have two questions here about age, minimum and maximum. So yes, we don't have a maximum. So candidates who are 60 years plus are eligible to apply to either program. And also fellows younger than 30 are considered, as long as they can demonstrate the 7 to 10 years of experience. So question is, can you provide us with examples of work experience in addressing social and economic inequalities? Are public sector workers and diplomats? Well, yes, those would be eligible if the diplomat was working on social and economic inequalities. And as I mentioned previously, public sector workers are indeed eligible if they can demonstrate that they have been working on social and economic inequalities. Question from Anonymous. Do fellows who apply for the non-residential program also receive 4 areas of focus components? Yes, so the modules are the same for the residential and non-residential. So what George covered in his presentation during the modules, both tracks will receive. The difference is that those on the residential track will then go on to do the MSc, which is different. Question, will applicants to from Nigeria, 5 from Nigeria, will applicants to the residential track who do not get LSE's admission be considered for the non-residential track if they are excellent applicants? This is a good question. Generally, what we recommend is that if you are indeed interested in being considered for both tracks, please apply for both tracks, because it is not necessarily automatically that if you are rejected for the non-residential track, that your application would be then immediately transferred into the residential track. So if you are interested in applying for both, you are permitted to apply to both tracks. And we do recommend doing that. So please take that. Question from Hyven. Is it possible to have the non-residential fellowship but submit a full dissertation and eventually get an MSc? No, because it's not just the dissertation that gives you the MSc. It's all of the coursework. So no, that is not possible. Question from Ellen. So the question is, it's more important, the profile is more important than the proposal for the dissertation, the research, the work wants to do. So specifically, it is all of those things are important, right? In your application, to have a strong application, you need to talk about the work you have done, as well as the work you plan to do, and how this fellowship will contribute to you achieving those goals. So it's not either or, it's both. And please look out at our website to find the exact times of the module, because I've been answering many questions, and I'm sorry that having those specific dates is not something I have in mind, but perhaps one of my colleagues can copy paste it, if that's possible, into the chat. Question from anonymous attendee, if my transcript is in a different language, can I upload it for now and get it translated? Well, I think you need to translate it, have an official translation, otherwise it's not going to be.
Oh, sorry, we have actually discussed this recently with graduate admissions, and at the point of application, you can translate the transcript yourself and attach a translation by yourself to make sure that during the first application process, your transcript can be read, but once it is accepted, we will need an official translation, which we will be reimbursing accepted for holders for.
Excellent, thank you. We've answered quite a few of the IELTS questions, so I'm not going to take any more. And there's quite a lot of information on our website and the LSE website. Question, can you apply for the fellowship with your home country as reference when you live in a different country? So if you live in Europe but are from an African country, well, it depends, I mean, obviously we know that in today's globalized world, people do have different kinds of nationalities and identities. So you can, bring that into the application. That's absolutely fine. So question, can we see examples of proposed projects or work carried out by previous non-residential fellows? There is information on our website. And actually, my colleague Saga just produced a film about fellows and their projects. So you can see that on our channel and what types of projects. Yes, current doctoral candidates cannot apply. Did say. Sorry, I'm reading the questions to find some that I have not, or that are not individual. Oh, interesting question from Natalie from South Africa. I'm wondering if there is a policy on the use of AI in our work. Actually, Natalie, that's a very good challenge question for us because we have not yet entered the realm of AI in our work, but I think we will be looking into that. However, I know that LSE has very strong rules around plagiarism and ensuring that the work submitted is done by the individual applicant. So I think we will come back to that. I can't give you a definitive answer now. A question, can UK nationals apply for either the residential or non-residential option? Yes, they can. A question from Huyan, how would you define inequalities? Please look at our website and you can see that. That is a huge question. Would you please give some examples of ideal candidates? Again, please look at our website because you can see the candidates that have been selected in the past 8 cohorts, and you can see, and we've been talking about this quite a lot. So question from Olatunde, what is the duration of the entire program? The duration of the active fellowship here is 1 year, starts in September, ends in August when the project is due. But because we are a lifelong fellowship, the fellowship continues. Now, again, that may not be our entire lifetimes, but this was established to be at least for 20 years. So that is, and you would be part of that. Question on, does the Rohingya are eligible to apply for the fellowship? Yes. Who are the funders of the program? Question from Sushma. It's the Atlantic Philanthropies.
Armina, do you mind if I just answer really quickly?
Yes, please.
Regarding, because I see there's a lot of questions regarding references. So we do understand that a lot of referees might be retired or no longer affiliated with an institution. If this is the case, we encourage you to provide any contact for the referee, but in your application, add a document explaining that the referee is retired. This is why you have selected their personal addresses. And we can deal with that through the admissions process. And then there's another question about the English test, just to reiterate that we encourage you to take the English test, or at least look into taking the English test as early as possible. But it needs to be, we need proof of your English proficiency by the time of after you're accepted. So that's so that will be around May of 2025. But again, as early as possible, the better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia. Yeah, mindful of time, so I'm trying to answer questions as many as possible. Question from Anonymous, is being part of activism a plus point? We aren't just for activists, we aren't just for people working in NGOs, we aren't for people just working in international organizations. We are a diverse community, so it's not a negative. You can mention it, and you can mention how that is part of your activities, and how that has informed your thinking to join this program. Question from Anonymous. Do I have to give a project idea before the application? Can the project be part of a bigger project, or the project funding is for one whole project? Generally, the project is for an individual. So if you work at an NGO, this can't be a side project for your NGO's project. And we are looking for applicants to identify the project that they want to do. And, to be mindful that this is a £10,000 project. So, if you put something in that is far, far greater and not feasible, then that's not necessarily going to work in your favor. Question about, do candidates qualify for the graduate visa to gain UK work experience after completion? Yes.
Sorry, yes, from the
residential track. Yes, thank you. Do you consider Palestinian territories, as we have ongoing war this year? We do have, yes, we do consider. And yeah. There's a question on whether we are a trans-friendly space. Yes, we are a trans-friendly space. We are an inclusive space for individuals, for all individuals, all being in capital letters and encompassing everyone. I'm finalizing my PhD. A question from Anonymous. I'm wondering about the broader impact of has this been measured or evaluated to know what the broader impact has now been? We are actually in the process of doing this impact evaluation, and we should have some results coming out hopefully in 2025. Asma, you want to say anything?
Yes, Amina, just to say, watch this space. This is currently a key question for us, and we are working on it. However, it will take us a few months, so it will be in 2025 that we'll be able to share some of that publicly.
Okay, thank you. We're just down to the last few minutes. Question from Anonymous about being in the grassroots movement. Yes, if that was your main area of work, that counts. Sorry. Are an NGO leader eligible for a full scholarship? Yes, everyone is entitled to the same scholarship. I'm just looking at questions I haven't answered. Okay, the questions I haven't answered that are open are questions that I had answered before or are very, very individual focused, so I won't be answering them on here because they require us to know more than I can give an answer in a webinar. So we are down to the last couple of minutes. I would like to thank everyone who has actively participated, including my colleagues on this webinar. Asma, Julia, George, and Saga, thank you so much for all your contribution and work. I also want to thank all of the attendees for coming. I think we have managed to answer the majority of the questions. If we have not answered a question or if your question was very, very specific to your individual case, then please do consider writing to us directly. You can contact us via email at afsee@lse.ac.uk. You can drop into one of our online drop-in sessions, which are available on our website. You can speak to our AFSEE ambassadors and join their online Q&A sessions. And we are available on almost all the social media channels from LinkedIn to X to Facebook and Instagram. So feel free to follow us and connect with us there. I'd like to reiterate that our application deadline is the 10th of January, 2025. And unfortunately, we do not have kind of flexibility in terms of extension. So that is a hard deadline. So please do start working on your applications in advance because late applications will not be accepted. And that is the hard deadline that you should be working towards. We will be having a second webinar on the 18th of November. So if you're interested in learning about the application process in greater detail, please do consider signing up and attending that. And thank you again to everyone who's been part of this webinar. Apologies if I didn't manage to get to your question. Please, again, if you do feel that you have a question that is specific to your case or your circumstances, highly recommend writing an email to us. So with that, at exactly 3:30, I'm going to draw this webinar to a close and wishing you all a good rest of your day. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.